The Chase credit card ecosystem is one of the most powerful when it comes to points and rewards. But like all credit card issuers, there are some things that Chase does well and some things that certainly could be improved. And if you're looking for how to build the best Chase credit card setup to help you earn a lot of ultimate rewards points on your everyday spending, you're in the right place. So in this video, we're going to build this credit card setup with exclusively Chase cards, balancing both value and simplicity, and we'll discuss important considerations along the way so you can see if this setup is right for you or if you prefer something different. And so one question that you probably have is, why even bother building an all Chase credit card setup when there are so many other credit cards out there? Well, for a lot of people just starting out with Chase credit cards, Chase is an excellent choice because of its catalog of no annual fee and lower annual fee cards, as well as the simplicity of redeeming ultimate rewards points for pretty good value. And if you're starting from scratch, your Chase 524 status would likely be 0 or 1 card in the last 24 months, so you have at least 4 to 5 cards that you can get before being automatically denied for Chase cards. And so by starting with Chase cards first, you can get all of these cards out of the way so you can then focus on cards from other issuers. And before I go any further, I'm going to make one small caveat because I know it's going to come up. If you're looking for the absolute fastest way to earn a lot of ultimate rewards points very, very quickly, applying for Chase credit cards during elevated welcome offer periods will be the best way to do that. But while I realize that this is the fastest method, the goal here in this video is to build a setup that we can use in our everyday lives, regardless of whether we're going for a welcome offer or not. While there are some of you that do all of your spending on cards just for welcome offers, I also know that there's a lot of you out there, myself included, who will at some point or another not be working on a welcome offer. So because of this, having this core credit card setup is very important because it'll be the setup you fall back on for your everyday spending in those situations and probably for most of your life. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's go over how we're going to organize our plan of attack when building this setup. Like I mentioned before, this is a core credit card setup, and within this, there are 3 categories of cards: specialty cards, general cards, and a catch-all credit card. Your specialty cards are those 5x multiplier cards that are highly rewarding in specific spending categories. Your general cards are the glue that holds your setup together, often having multiple elevated categories. And your catch-all credit card will capture all other spending. So we're gonna go through each section and see which Chase credit cards would fit best in each one. And while we do this, we also want to build a setup that has elevated multipliers in those everyday spending categories, namely restaurants, groceries, travel, transit, and gas. Now, Chase has a reputation of not being very friendly in this regard, in that their credit card portfolio is missing elevated multipliers in the grocery and gas categories specifically. So we're going to have to get a little creative to cover those ones. Of course, there are plenty of other cards out there to fill in these gaps, such as the Citi Custom Cash and the PayPal Debit MasterCard. But today, we're going to solve that problem just using Chase credit cards. Another aspect that we'll consider when building this credit card setup is the balance between value and simplicity. And while other issuers have 5x and 5% cards where you choose the category, Chase only has the Freedom and Freedom Flex cards, and those cards have rotating categories. And I personally don't prefer these types of cards because the categories aren't stable. But since the quarterly limit is only $1,500, having 2 or 3 of these types of cards can be helpful if you want to go down that path and also raise that upper limit if you happen to spend more in a particular 5x category that quarter. I also want to discuss the option to use Chase business cards. I think we can all agree that Chase has some very powerful business cards, and if you can get them, they can earn you some tremendous value. So because of this, I wouldn't sleep on Chase business cards, namely the Ink card lineup, since not only do these cards have pretty lucrative welcome offers, but they have some pretty good multipliers that we can use for this setup as well. Okay, so let's first start by identifying the cards that would be a good fit as specialty cards. And the first set of cards that could work here are the ones that I just mentioned, which are the Chase Freedom Flex and Chase Freedom cards. Starting with the Chase Freedom Flex, this is a no annual fee credit card that earns 5x points back on Chase travel, 5x points back on rotating categories, 3x points back on dining, 3x points back in drugstores, and 1x points back on all other purchases. This card is most widely known for its 5x points back on quarterly rotating categories. These include common everyday categories such as gas stations, grocery stores, and select online merchants on up to $1,500 in total combined purchases each quarter. Now again, I don't like rotating category cards because I should be the one who chooses my spending category, not the other way around. So while this could work as a 5x card, it's not consistent, and even if there's a category that works, it's only going to be there for 3 months out of the year. The second card, which is the Chase Freedom card, is very similar to the Chase Freedom Flex card, except the only elevated category it has is that 5x points back on rotating categories with 1x points back on all other purchases. This card isn't available to new applicants and can only be acquired through a product change. And one question that's commonly asked is, why would I get a Chase Freedom card when the Chase Freedom Flex is better? Well, the answer is because of the welcome offer terms on the Chase Freedom Flex. Since you can't earn a Chase Freedom Flex welcome offer if you already have an existing Chase Freedom Flex card, the product change is the method to get around that and qualify for a new Chase Freedom Flex welcome offer, provided you had the other one for over 24 months. So these two cards are certainly options, but they're not the strongest options. So what other choices do we have? Well, another personal Chase card with a 5x multiplier is the Chase Amazon Prime card. This card has no annual fee and earns unlimited 5% cash back on Amazon.com, Amazon Fresh, Whole Foods Market, and on Chase Travel with an eligible Prime membership. It also earns unlimited 2% cash back at gas stations, restaurants, and transit, as well as unlimited 1% cash back on all other purchases. And so this is a great card to consider if you spend a lot of money in online shopping with Amazon, and also if you get your groceries from Amazon Fresh or Whole Foods Market. And if we add this card to our setup, we have a card with a stable multiplier that can cover a subset of the online shopping category, as well as the grocery category, at least with Amazon Fresh and Whole Foods. But another card that we can't forget is a Chase Business card that has a very solid 5x category, and that would be the Chase Ink Cash card. This card has no annual fee and earns 5x points back on the first $25,000 spent in combined purchases at office supply stores and on internet, cable, and phone services each account anniversary year. It also earns 2x points back on the first $25,000 spent in combined purchases at gas stations and at restaurants, as well as 1% cash back on all other purchases. So at first glance, 5x points back at office supply stores doesn't seem to be that helpful for everyday spending categories because you can't really eat paper clips or staples. But one of the nice things about office supply stores is that they sell other merchandise that may or may not be helpful. So it's definitely possible to earn 5x points back on everyday spending categories if you get a little creative. Okay, so those are the 4 possible cards that you could use as specialty cards in this Chase credit card setup. This is what I would consider to be one of Chase's weak points, as the options are pretty limited, especially because one of their flagship cards, the Chase Freedom Flex, is a rotating category card, which is not helpful when we're trying to build a credit card setup. So now let's turn our attention to what could be our general cards. These cards will help us unlock Chase's transfer partners so that we can redeem our UR points for not only cash back, but also transfer them out to get even better value. And so the 3 options that we have are the Chase Sapphire Preferred, the Chase Sapphire Reserve, and the Chase Ink Business Preferred, and all of those cards have no foreign transaction fees. Starting with a Chase Sapphire Preferred, this card has an annual fee of $95 and earns 5x points back on Chase Travel, 3x points back on dining, online groceries, and streaming services, 2x points back on travel, and 1x points back on everything else. And so let's dive into each multiplier in detail. One of the issues with the Chase Sapphire lineup, including the Sapphire Preferred, is that the 3x dining category overlaps with the ones found on the Freedom cards. From my perspective, it's best when you have cards in a core setup where the categories do not overlap so that each card has a specific purpose. But with Chase, that's kind of hard to do. The 3x points back on online grocery is another interesting dilemma because this card would be so much better if it was just 3x points back on groceries in general. Still, if you happen to buy your groceries online, that would work. Or if you paid in store with the card loaded on a grocery store app, there have been some data points saying that this charge may code as online groceries, and so this could be a helpful multiplier if this works for your situation. On that same note, the 5x points back on Chase Travel and 3x points back on streaming services is nice to have, but nothing that makes or breaks this card. And so that brings us to the 2x travel category. Now, one nice thing about this category with Chase is that it's pretty broad, covering both the travel and transit categories together. But 2x points back on travel is not really that great, which is why we should mention the other 2 cards which have a higher multiplier in this category. Starting with the Chase Sapphire Reserve, this card has a $550 annual fee and earns 10x points back on hotels and car rentals when purchased through Chase Travel, 10x points back on Chase dining purchases with ultimate rewards, 5x points back on flights when purchased through Chase Travel, 3x points back on dining and travel, and 1x points back on all other purchases. This card also comes with a $300 annual travel credit, which lowers the effective annual fee to $250, and it allows you to redeem your Chase points for 50% more value when you redeem travel through Chase, as well as other perks and benefits. And if we look at the other card, which is the Chase Ink Preferred, this card has a $95 annual fee and earns 3x points back on the first $150,000 spent in combined purchases in shipping, advertising with social media and search engine sites, internet, cable and phone services, and travel. So both the Sapphire Reserve and Ink Preferred offer that 3x travel multiplier, but the Reserve has an annual fee of $550, while the Preferred has an annual fee of $95. Now I understand that this isn't an apples to apples comparison, since the Sapphire Reserve comes with a lot of other travel related benefits, including airport lounge access. But for the purposes of what would be the best general card in this setup, it's going to depend on what you're looking for. When it comes to the Sapphire Preferred versus the Sapphire Reserve, the issue is that the Sapphire Preferred benefits overlap with the ones on the Freedom cards, and a 2x travel multiplier doesn't really set this card apart in a significant way. With the Sapphire Reserve, you get a 3x travel multiplier that is much more helpful, but you do pay that much higher $550 annual fee for it. And if you travel often and can take advantage of the Sapphire Reserve's benefits, including that 50% redemption boost with redeeming your points with Chase Travel, then the Sapphire Reserve could definitely be worth it. When it comes to the Sapphire Reserve versus the Ink Preferred, the Ink Preferred is better if you're really just looking for that 3x travel multiplier. But the Sapphire Reserve will be better if you want to use your general card as a primary travel card in addition to a spending card. And when it comes to the Sapphire Preferred versus the Ink Preferred, the Ink Preferred, in my opinion, is much better. They both have the same benefits of unlocking Chase's transfer partners, a 25% redemption boost with redeeming your points with Chase Travel, and having a $95 annual fee. But the Ink Preferred has that higher 3x travel multiplier, which is nice, especially since with Chase, travel covers transit. I also want to mention another card that could be a great addition to one of these three cards to cover that elusive grocery category. The Chase Aeroplan card, which has a $95 annual fee, while a co-branded card earns 3x points back at grocery stores, dining, and with Air Canada in the form of Chase Aeroplan points. And so if you have a Sapphire Preferred, Sapphire Reserve, or Ink Preferred, you'll have the ability to transfer your points to the Aeroplan program. And if that's something you think you do, this card could also fit in this setup so you don't have to do the runaround with the 3x online grocery multiplier on the Chase Sapphire Preferred. Okay, so that brings us to the catch-all credit card, and for Chase, there are two options: the Freedom Unlimited and the Ink Unlimited. The Chase Freedom Unlimited card has no annual fee and earns 5x points back on Chase Travel, 3x points back on dining, 3x points back on drugstore purchases, and 1.5x points back on all other purchases. And the Chase Ink Business Unlimited card also has no annual fee and earns 1.5x points back on all purchases. So if we look at these two cards head to head, the better card is going to be the Chase Freedom Unlimited, since it has those extra multipliers aside from the 1.5x catch-all multiplier. And if you decide to get the Chase Sapphire Reserve, if you redeem those points earned with the Chase Freedom Unlimited in the Chase Travel Portal, you'd get a 50% boost on those points, which would bring that earnings rate from 1.5x to 2.25x, which is competitive as compared to other 2x or 2% credit cards that are out there. Okay, so those are the options for a Chase-based core credit card setup, including the specialty category, the general category, and the catch-all category. And so let's tie this all together, and here are my recommendations for the best Chase credit card setup that maximizes earning categories, but also balances cost and credit card setup complexity. We'll start with the Chase Ink Cash for its 5x category in office supply stores, and the Chase Amazon Prime card for its 5x category in Amazon purchases, as well as Whole Foods and Amazon Fresh. We then have the Ink Preferred card for its 3x travel category and ability to unlock Chase's transfer partners, as well as the Chase Aeroplan card for 3x points back at grocery stores. And then we have the Chase Freedom Unlimited card for 3x points back at restaurants, 3x points back on drugstore purchases, and 1.5x points back on everything else. And we can see that our setup has a total of 5 cards, with 2 of those cards having an annual fee of $95 each, and the other 3 having no annual fee. And for this setup, the coverage is 5x points back on office supply stores, 5x points back at Amazon purchases, 3x points back on groceries, 3x points back on travel, 3x points back on dining, 3x points back on drugstore purchases, and 1.5x points back on everything else. And if you wanted to add some extra flair to the setup, the Chase Sapphire Reserve could replace that Ink Preferred for those luxury travel benefits and access to that 50% points boost when redeeming your UR points with Chase travel. And so what do you think of this setup? Is this a setup that you see yourself using, or are there other Chase cards that you think would be better or should be added to make this setup more complete? Of course, the setup was limited to only Chase cards, which can help boost those UR points through everyday spending, but to have a truly effective setup, it's helpful to add cards from other issuers. And to see the best no annual fee credit card setup, check out this video next.